And hello again, everyone. Welcome to yet another edition of Alpharetta Tech Talk. I'm John Ray, and we are coming to you from the Business RadioX studio inside Renasant Bank in beautiful Alpharetta. And folks, today you're connected more than ever, whether it's your friends, your family, or your life. Renasant understands how you bank, offering the mobile banking services that you need. And Renasant also knows that sometimes you need to speak to real people with real answers. And that's why Renasant has more than 190 convenient locations throughout the South ready to serve you. For more information, go to renasantbank.com. Renasant Bank, understanding you, member FDIC. I want to turn to someone who's going to give us the big picture of Alpharetta and what's going on here tech-wise and beyond that. Matt Thomas. Matt is the Economic Development Manager for the City of Alpharetta. Matt, welcome.
Thanks, John. Glad to be here.
Yeah, great to have you here.
Absolutely.
So before we get into what everybody wants to hear about, technology in Alpharetta, tell us a little bit about you and how you came to your position here at the city.
Yeah, I'm glad to. So I spent the past 5 years doing economic development with the city of Canton, just across the county line in Cherokee. And that was really, truly my first sort of foray, if you will, into handling an entire economic development program. Prior to that, I'd gotten experience with the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, the Dalton Whitfield Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Chattanooga Chamber of Commerce. And all three of those respective chambers have an economic development function that allowed me to really gain a lot of exposure, meet a lot of wonderful people, as well as really understand the ins and outs and the nuances of economic development and what helps to not only bring proposed ideas to fruition, but also the inner workings of various deals, various projects, various initiatives, and understanding the sort of the ecosystem of relationships that also help to make things happen. And so I came on board with Alpharetta back in June of last year, and it's been a blast ever since. This is an incredible community. I'm truly honored to do what I do here.
Yeah, you've got experience across several different communities around this area, and I'm curious. We'll get into the everything about the technology industry and all that here in a second, but I'm just curious about what you see in the people, the business relationships that distinguishes the city.
Yeah,
in this area.
I think that, to kind of preface that, Alpharetta is a very affluent community. 65% of the population here has at least a bachelor's degree. And so that sort of, that kind of gives some layer or some complexion to how things like the kind of questions that come my way and the kinds of engagement that happens is understanding that more often than not, I'm speaking to a very well educated, very well rounded, well versed audience. And so for me, that means that comes with a lot of preparation, that needs to be had. And I think, taking nothing away from those other respective communities, but man, people in Alpharetta love Alpharetta, and it's everything from the kinds of industry that comes all the way down to the character and the impacts of the drive, whether it's from, the office to the house or the respective entertainment districts or mixed use districts in the city. People here really value that. And I'll also add, in addition to that, there's a high priority on the character. It's the greenery. It's things like the Greenway and the different parks and trail systems here that people enjoy, and they take a sense of ownership, to those destinations. And it's great because I think that, for things that come through that are good for Alpharetta, people tend to support.
Sure.
And rightfully so. Again, that's not to negate, any of the other places, but those to me really stand out among Alpharetta residents. And I love the levels of engagement and the passion that comes through to make sure that for anything we're looking to revitalize, to redevelop, to, perhaps rethink a particular corridor, that level of true community love and pride comes out, and it frames everything.
Now, we are Alpharetta Tech Talk. That's the name of this show, and we're all about technology. So let's get into that. Now, we were talking before we came on that Alpharetta is known for having roughly 700 technology companies. There's a classic story about that, folks counting that up and realizing, wow, we've got a lot of technology companies that are already here. And so they really sprung up over some period of time due to some investments made a long time ago. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, there was a real strategic vision, and a lot of that was opportunity too. But Alpharetta, I think that I think some of the early beginning to us becoming a tech hub was being open to take 4 exits along Georgia 400, that helps to connect Alpharetta to Atlanta and the rest of the metro area. Unlike any other interstate system, really here in North Fulton, to have 4 in the city alone means that it gave Alpharetta the capacity to, whether, really on board or by way of transportation, connect Alpharetta to the rest of the world. And even though Alpharetta itself is only about 20 something odd miles from Atlanta, the Georgia 400 corridor really opened up that opportunity in a way that no other highway system here had previously been able to do so. And within that, as things began to develop along Georgia 400, the vision came to lay down miles of dark fiber optic cable throughout the city. And dark fiber optic cable is basically fiber optic cable that's not being used. But that then drove site selection for homes and offices that house companies that need to have access to infrastructure that allows them to send or receive large amounts of data and a really fast period of time. And so Georgia 400, fiber optic cable network, and then, at that time, land here was much cheaper than it is now.
Right.
So the development community was working with the city was able to understand what those opportunities were. And so that then began to perpetuate the commercial office and residential boom that we have here today. Now Alpharetta is a market of over 20 million square feet of office and counting. And it's those offices that house the variety of corporate headquarters and Fortune 5, Fortune 1000 and technology companies that we're so proud of today.
Yeah. And so I'm just curious. I want to jump ahead if I can, talking about visionary investments. So those investments were made years ago to create what we are enjoying today. So what are the visionary investments you think need to be made today to ensure that we will have the next generation will experience the same kind of opportunity that we enjoy today?
That's a really good question. I think that, there's a lot of conversation around smart cities and 5G connectivity, whereas I think the rest of the world is, and we still too operate in a very much a 4G world, 5G just allows for more data at a faster speed. And a lot of that comes by way of above the ground, sort of vertical asset infrastructure. Unlike the sort of fiber optic cable or fiber optic cable network that you see underground, which, I mean, it's kind of hard to vision because you don't see it every day.
Sure.
Whereas with a lot of the 5G stuff, there is the capability to go above ground as well as underground if you need to. But as more and more companies continue to locate and invest and grow in Alpharetta, as well as the residential growth as well, it does put, it does put a level of, I think a lot of times, a lot of use on our existing infrastructure. And, to the extent that we can open up that data transmission even more, the better it positions us for new investment. And I think that, it's that kind of, it takes being proactive in that regard to ensure that we stay at the forefront when companies are looking for, some sort of Southeast presence or location of some kind.
Okay. So I couldn't resist that. I had to fast forward and look at the future, but let's pull it back to today now. So we were talking a little bit before about the network effect and how the network effect, the classic beneficial aspects of the network effect, that the more the network grows, the more it benefits everyone in the network. And it seems like that's what's going on in Alpharetta.
Yeah.
In the technology sector in Alpharetta.
Very much true. You can call it a ripple effect. You can call it a halo effect. I was just alluding to before, some folks call it the Avalon effect, where, the development and property values around that particular development, have kind of gone up because people want to be around it.
Sure.
We definitely benefit from the corporate synergies and the tech synergy that is here, really due to the critical mass of what's here. And I think that, it's like such and such behavior begat such and such behavior. And so here what that looks like is when one company sees that, regardless of the particular tech space they may be in, when they see that a tech company or a corporate headquarters can thrive here, I think what comes to their mind is why not us? If they're successful in that location, then why not try our luck or try our hand at it? And especially, when there's the realization that they can find a qualified workforce to staff those needs and the quality of life is good, it becomes a magnet. And two, that also works for complementary industries too. Companies who may have more of a B2B correlation with the larger client who's in the area, and, for beneficial business reasons want to be closer to that client, it works. And, a lot of the Alpharetta story is due to the fact, yes, we've got a lot of office space here that can certainly welcome a lot of new companies, but I think it's also other companies realizing, hey, this is truly a thriving tech environment. And, for our next sort of site selection location strategy, we should give Alpharetta a try. And the word is continuing to get out about Alpharetta's desirability for technology-led growth as a great place to work, but also as a great place to live.
Now, I'm curious about the branding effort, though. I mean, we've got these 700 technology companies. They've been here quite a while. We've created a brand around that. Technology City of the South. Technology City of the South.
Yep.
How do you judge the success of that branding effort? Is Alpharetta a brand name when it comes to technology now?
Here's what's interesting. As far as we know, there's only one Alpharetta in the U.S. So the name alone stands out.
That's a fortuitous thing, right?
Yeah. It definitely,
right. Yeah.
It benefits what we're doing. But, so I'll tell you a story. Very recently, there's a company called Zoom Video who develops software for both audio as well as video conference calling. They're really, really strong in the video conference call space. Their headquarters are out in Silicon Valley, and I think earlier this year they went public. And Zoom was trying to decide where along the Southeast they wanted to plant that sort of East Coast hub to grow their operations on this side of the country. And Mayor Gilvin and I, we met with their top guy earlier this year, D. Fry, and he was telling us, we chose Alpharetta because of the quality of life that we already understood was here, and the very strong public school system that we understand is here, and the magnitude and scope of tech that's already here. All those things were desirable to us, which is why we chose where along this part of the country we wanted to be. It was somewhere in the metro area, and of all the different, wonderful communities, they chose Alpharetta. And it's for those strong reasons that I think, our city continues to stand out and differentiate ourselves. We aren't Midtown. We aren't Buckhead. But for the quality of life, and that's everything from our park spaces to the things to do outside of work. It's the reasons why you would want to live here, raise a family. It's a very safe place. It's a very connected environment. It's a very walkable city. All of those wonderful attributes, in addition to our strength in tech, continues to draw a lot of companies and potential investors.
Now, Matt, one of the things that stands out is in Alpharetta, relative to a lot of places, is you can judge a lot in terms of what's going on here by the top employers.
Yeah. Our top employers are, believe it or not, our top employer, as it stands today, is ADP. And they've got several locations around Alpharetta, well over 2,000 in their head count. But companies like ADP, LexisNexis, Ernst & Young, all of those sit among the top of our top employers. E-Trade is another. Equifax is another among our top employers. And John, all these companies are in the fintech sort of vertical of technology, which means to us that, yes, having the companies here is phenomenal, but those levels of growth means that they can find the workers. And we know those workers come from a 360-degree angle, as Alpharetta is a huge net importer of jobs, about 85,000 people coming into the city a day to work. But to find that level of success happening here in Alpharetta, sort of in that transaction alley, if you will, of the metro Atlanta region, it really speaks to the product that Alpharetta offers that would allow a company within that space to thrive and be successful.
Now, you mentioned fintech, so let's get into fintech for a second. So you ADP, Fiserv, LexisNexis, E-Trade, another one. Talk a little bit about how you see that the growth of that particular sector playing out here in Alpharetta over the next few years.
Yeah, I think one reason that helps to drive that, one is going back to our fiber optic story. And during the 1990s, when a lot of that was laid, eventually you had power companies, utilities, a number of different users of those respective applications, mobile carriers even, that began to pull and rely on that infrastructure, creating redundancies within that network, because now you can just envision data flying back and forth constantly. From what we understand today, Alpharetta has download speeds and internet speeds that are 7 times faster than the national average. Now, you take that into, you can stream your Netflix and that's great too, but you take that to a company that's in the world of payment processing, meaning that the second you swipe your card, you know that the money is going from somewhere to another, and that transfer is happening at a lightning fast rate. Some of those companies that we've named before, they are the drivers behind those transactions. So you can imagine the level of dependency that those companies would need to drive to send that data back and forth, and the infrastructure necessary to accommodate the talent and the data. And the attributes of Alpharetta within our existing infrastructure environment allows companies doing that to be successful. And that even extends even over to, I've mentioned this before at one point in time too, but a company called BitPay that's here in Alpharetta, and they are sort of trailblazers in the Bitcoin space, where they don't necessarily deal with the traditional sort of monetary cash checks kind of transactions, but what they do is tied to cryptocurrency, and it's payment processing by way of Bitcoin. And they've got plans to grow their current headcount. I think they're somewhere around 50 or 60, and they're in Avalon, but they are AT&T Mobile's cryptocurrency payment processing partner. That means for AT&T's mobile customers around the globe, the payment processing through any kind of cryptocurrency goes through an agency headquartered in Alpharetta, Georgia. The same is true for earlier this year. The Dallas Mavericks owner, Mark Cuban, mentioned the same, that the Dallas Mavericks would begin to accept Bitcoin as a form of payment, and BitPay is their partner. And Alpharetta's environment enables that level of innovation, that level of data transmission speeds. And, it's exciting to see, because for us, it means that there are endless possibilities into what this sort of conglomerate mix of fintech can be within that sort of larger tagline of technology city of the South. And
sure.
A lot of times when we're talking about the Metro Atlanta region being Transaction Alley, more often than not, that conversation alludes to the innovation happening here in Alpharetta.
We're speaking with Matt Thomas, and Matt is the Economic Development Manager for the City of Alpharetta. Digital animation, I want to get to that, because that's an area that's pretty interesting. Maybe not as big as fintech, of course, but it's pretty interesting how that whole industry has developed here in Alpharetta.
Yeah, esports is growing fast,
and for those that don't know what esports is, there are a few out there.
Yeah,
tell them about that. Unpack that.
Yeah, it's kind of like in the traditional sports world, where, when there's a big football game, baseball game, basketball game happening, you have a lot of people, thousands, gather to watch some of the best go head to head against one another. Esports is that same concept, only it's tied to electronic gaming, and it is continuing to grow in interest, especially among a younger demographic. And the pitch is, you don't have to be athletic,
right,
to really participate if you want to as an esports gamer.
Yeah, so there's a minority audience that's listening to this, but there's a minority of audience out there that's like, I can't believe this is a thing, right? But it's a big thing.
cutting edge. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry that companies like Cox Media and Disney have all jumped into the game, if you will, realizing the benefits, the profitability of what this emerging technology could bring, and sort of at the, pioneering a lot of the game development, the education, a lot of times, the convening of esports and the gamers, the developers, the media play with the broadcasters and the coders, is a company called Hi-Res Studios, located right off of Highway 9 is their headquarters. They've got about 150, 160 folks employed there, but they develop esports games. The characters, they bring together a lot of the sponsors and those multi-billion-dollar companies to support the players and get information to the captive esports audience. They have sort of a media offshoot of that called Skillshot Media, which is also headquartered here in Alpharetta. And, right now they're building inroads with folks like the Georgia Department of Education to bring esports into the classroom, to a whole new world of students who, could not just benefit from being a great gamer, but more importantly, underneath that is the ability to code, or, the ability to read code, the ability to work in teams that, maybe you aren't the fastest runner or you don't have the strongest arm or the greatest jump shot, but here's something everyone can engage in and get behind. And I think that tells a wonderful story of, kind of the story within the story of what esports is doing, what it could mean. And to have our own Hi-Res Studios championing that is truly phenomenal. This weekend, they have their big Hi-Res Expo happening in Atlanta, where thousands of gamers and esports lovers will gather and really celebrate what's happening in the space, talk some about the future. And our economic development office supports that because it's a great thing that an Alpharetta company is doing. And we also recognize the growth that could mean for Alpharetta. So we're really proud of, Todd Harris and his crew for really running with that and making great things happen out of the world of esports. And who would have thunk it, right?
Sure.
From Super Nintendos to Sega Genesis to PlayStations to now a multi-billion-dollar industry. Of course, it's more complex than those consoles, but still, it's kind of a wow moment for Alpharetta, and we're looking now at how we can best foster that environment too.
Right. So, I'm interested in the whole notion of how all this development. You talk about these larger companies and the moving their headquarters, opening up regional headquarters here, how that impacts the startup community, because we've got a pretty thriving startup community. And obviously there's Tech Alpharetta that the city birthed several years ago. Yeah. But how does that – talk about that interplay?
Yeah. So we understand that, economic development more often than not is not really what you call a very – it's not sustainable to just thrive on what's top heavy. You have to continue to build the ecosystem and foster the new things, grow the new things, support the new things that are happening. HP started out of a garage. You never know. But to truly say that we are the technology city of the South means that we want to position ourselves to be a destination for all kinds of tech. And that means that we aren't just a a great friend and ally of the Fortune 5s of the world, but the backbone of our economy is small business. And Karen Cash and her team at Tech Alpharetta, they do great work to fly the banner of Alpharetta as a technology hub, and where we're growing. But and I'll mention too that we've got about 6 co-working spaces in Alpharetta alone. Those co-working environments allow a number of companies to sort of operate under one roof. They provide resources, they provide training, they provide the office space, the Wi-Fi, the legal advice, the HR counsel. Some of them help with site selection once they get beyond sort of that point where they've outgrown their space. Thrive Co-working, for example, recently announced an expansion of 14,000 square feet in downtown Alpharetta. And I like to say, anytime I hear co-working, you can automatically tack about 4 or 5 companies to that particular umbrella, because co-working is such a multi-tenant concept by nature. But we, by way of supporting Tech Alpharetta, it's one way that the city's being very proactive of supporting the startup and the small business economy around tech. And it's everything from the strategic board to events and programs to the incubator itself, which the 10th company from Tech Alpharetta, the 10th graduate company from Tech Alpharetta, was announced just last week, a company called Maptician, and they've chosen to plant their headquarters here in Alpharetta. Earlier this year, the city took a bold step in saying, it's been a desire for a long time since we've had the incubator with Tech Alpharetta to want those companies, after they graduate, to stay in Alpharetta. But, if they can find a cheaper office space, somewhere close by, we've also seen some of that too. And so, it somewhat became a head scratcher of, wow, we're helping foster your growth, but, you leave and go elsewhere. And we understand, we get the economics of it all. But earlier this year, the city also chose to sort of build on an existing incentive program we have called the Local Jobs Creation Grant by saying, in addition to this existing program, for any company that graduates from Tech Alpharetta that chooses to headquarter in Alpharetta and hires an Alpharetta resident, and that resident stays employed by the company for at least 1 year, the city is willing to cut you a $250 check per Alpharetta resident employee. And I think it's just a great way of saying, hey, we want you here and we want to continue to support your growth and operations in the city. And I can't think of a city yet that's taken that level of initiative and ownership and support of tech companies that are homegrown.
Yeah, and part of what is required here is to look at economic development a little differently, right? Because if you measure the impact of the technology industry by jobs, mm-hmm. which is the old way politicians look at economic development, right? How many jobs got developed, right? And that's
still important.
It's still out there and it's still important. But part of it is there might be fewer jobs, but a whole lot bigger payrolls, right? And a whole lot bigger spillover effect in terms of the innovation that brings. Yeah,
that's true. So when we look at things like that and what those payrolls may mean, I mean, you're exactly right. Some of it is economies of scale and kind of at times elimination where there may be a duplication of efforts, or given the technology today, sometimes you just don't need as many people as you used to. And so when we look at the overall sort of economic impact, if you will, or ways to award that, we consider the impact of what that may mean from a payroll standpoint, and the realization too that those folks have to eat lunch. You know, they've got to buy gas, or
Yep.
you know, if they choose to live here, even better, because that's more spending that happens inside the community that, again, facilitates that whole ripple effect and ways that supports our existing restaurants and retailers and sort of ups the sales tax impact of the creation of those jobs, if you will.
Okay, so Matt, I mean, you're out soliciting companies, employers to locate in Alpharetta. So let's get to something near and dear to their hearts. We talked a little bit about Zoom earlier as a case study around cost of living. Is it still cost effective to do business in Alpharetta?
Depends on how you look at it.
I mean, we're like the frog in boiling water, right? I mean, we don't know because we're right in the middle of it. But how do we look relative? You know, how's that changed here relative to the rest of the country?
Yeah.
You know, is Alpharetta still a cost-effective place for companies to relocate to?
Yes, and I will say that, kind of looking at a very macro level of Alpharetta's place in Metro Atlanta compared to the Silicon Valleys, and we've got a lot of numbers and charts that show the Atlanta MSA compared to Boston or compared to Dallas, and frequently Alpharetta, Atlanta, really truly the Metro Atlanta area ranks among the lowest in terms of cost of living and the cost of living index, and that's important. It's important when companies are looking to hire fresh graduates from, you know, a Georgia Tech or an Emory or from the AUC or a UGA, and it's also important really just across the board. I mean, if you're looking for sort of more value for your buck, what Metro Atlanta offers is among some of the least expensive in among the major metros in the U.S. You know, and looking at it more regionally, when we look at the Metro Atlanta area and here in North Fulton, yes, Alpharetta stands out, you know, as kind of one of the more expensive places, but you know, while that's a sort of a key attribute to our community, I think, you know, a lot of it too is driven by choice. And, you know, even if not here, we know we're a huge net importer of jobs, and you know, I think that, you know, that key characteristic as to who we are speaks to the kind of residential housing product we have that diversifies us from other cities, if you will, that may be close by.
Way cool. Matt Thomas. Matt is the Economic Development Manager for the City of Alpharetta. So, Matt, this has been great. We could go on for quite a while, obviously, but might as well draw it to a close, I guess, at this point. But for those that want more information, and I know you're happy to have your phone on the hook for people that want to reach out and touch you, right? If they're interested in the City of Alpharetta, interested in the technology sector here, maybe interested in moving their company here, how do they be in touch with you?
Yeah. So our main web portal is growalpharetta.com, and that website is rich with information and details about Alpharetta, the different some of the numbers we kind of talked about a little bit earlier. You can find them there. You can also go to selectalpharetta.com, which is our site selection database, but it's also live and interactive with some of the most current U.S. Census data out there. A third-party platform updates that information for us frequently, so we don't have to worry about, you know, whether or not it's up to date. But I also recommend Alpharetta360.com, and Alpharetta 360 just houses a lot of the videos that we have. Really started a couple of years ago, where we went around and just started interviewing corporate CEOs and asking them why they chose Alpharetta. And, you know, it's those investors that can tell us on the public sector, you know, they can tell us a whole lot more than what we know at City Hall oftentimes in terms of kind of what's happening on the ground and in the economy. So Alpharetta 360 allows them to share their voice, and I think that has been helpful as we continue to recruit new businesses as well. Of course, my email is mthomas@alpharetta.ga.us. My office is at City Hall, and yeah, I like to keep an open door.
Man, sounds great. Matt Thomas, he's the Economic Development Manager for the City of Alpharetta. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, John.
Absolutely. Folks, just a reminder, this is a series that we have here on North Fulton Business RadioX, Alpharetta Tech Talk, and if you miss any of our shows, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, pretty much any of your favorite podcast apps. We're also on YouTube. But go to northfultonbusinessradiox.com, search for Alpharetta Tech Talk, and you'll find our episodes there. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, North Fulton BRX. You'll find all our shows there, Alpharetta Tech Talk, along with other shows that we have here in the North Fulton Business RadioX studio. So for my guest, Matt Thomas, I'm John Ray. Join us next time here on Alpharetta Tech Talk.
Renasant Rewards Extra is the checking account that checks all the boxes. Roadside assistance? Check. Cell phone insurance? Check. More than 400,000 local shopping discounts? Check. Up to $25 per month in ATM refunds and a great rate? Check. All in an easy-to-use mobile app. To open an account or find out more about Renasant Rewards Extra Checking, go to RenasantBank.com or visit us at any of our more than 190 locations throughout the South. Renasant Bank. Understanding you. Member FDIC. Equal housing lender.